Welcome to Season 10, Episode 61 of the Be Conscious podcast. Today, I am so pleased to interview Michelle-Arpin-Begina, a senior financial advisor on a mission to teach people how to talk about money. Listen in as Michelle shares how a family betrayal and financial secrets framed her money story and what she is doing to bring guts and wisdom to our conversations about money. Here we go.
Welcome to the Be Conscious podcast, the show that brings you enlightened perspectives on the frequency of money, life's many challenges, and those heavy feelings that may be holding you back from living your best life. And now your host, Dr. Susan Nicholas.
In this inspiring episode of the Be Conscious podcast with Michelle, we're going to talk about family secrets and circumstances that shape our experiences with money. If we have any hope in changing our financial futures, we must have presence of mind and clarity of thought. Something that has helped me on my conscious journey with mental clarity and awareness is Magic Mind. Magic Mind is a clean, organic 2-ounce mental performance shot that keeps you at peak mental performance throughout the day. And you know what I absolutely love about Magic Mind is that it not only tastes great, but I no longer have those midday energy slumps. Listen, if you're looking for an alternative to the jitters and the ups and downs of caffeine, or if you simply want to enhance your favorite energy drink, give Magic Mind a try. You'll wonder what you ever did before Magic Mind, and if you're anything like me, look forward to it every morning. The Be Conscious podcast gets $30 off new subscriptions with code BeConscious20 at checkout. That's www.magicmind.com/BeConscious20. Now let's get back to our interview with Michelle. Michelle, welcome to the Be Conscious podcast.
Susan, it's so great to be with you.
This is a conversation that I think will benefit many, many people. I believe, honestly, Michelle, generations to come.
Oh, I hope so.
I would love for you to share with us, what is your money story? Like, what was it about your life that has propelled you into what you're doing today?
I have many money stories. The thread, there are three that really stand out from the time I was 5 until I was 17 that have a common thread of secrecy. The first story was when I was 5 years old, waking up on a Saturday morning, ready to watch cartoons, when my father walked into my bedroom and was about to take some money out of my piggy bank. And when I saw him do that, he turned and asked if he could borrow the money. And I asked him what it was for. And he said cigarettes. And when he said cigarettes, I said, no, you can't have the money. Unfortunately, he took the money anyway. I burst out crying. He walked out the door as if it had never happened. I'll talk more about that in a second. Fast forward to when I was 10, my mother was away visiting family. My brother and I were home with my dad for about a week. And my father had an opportunity to buy his dream car, which at the time was a navy blue Jaguar, vintage. And he called my mom, talked to her about it, and she said, no, I don't think it's wise to buy it. He bought it anyway. He garaged it, he housed it in our garage. And then he swore me to secrecy. So when my mom would call to check on us, I was holding this big burden and I felt like a crumb. Fast forward to when I was 17, I was newly graduated from high school and I was standing on a dock of a marina. My parents had invited me down to see their new yacht. And unbeknownst to me, that was the moment that I found out that my parents had bought that boat with my college fund.
Mm.
There's a thread, and it's only in hindsight and, doing the work that you're talking about in, uncovering and discovering how we're influenced by our past, that I'm able to even share what I'm going to share now with this thread. The common element of secrecy. When my father walked out when I was 5 years old of that room, when I burst out crying after he took my money, that silenced me.
Mm.
He silenced, or my reaction to it was, he silenced what my deepest values were. No, you cannot use my money for something that might harm you, Dad. I love you too much.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 10, I was literally asked to be silent about buying the car. And then when I was 17, I chose to be silent. When they bought that boat, I was so ashamed of what had happened. Everyone was expecting me to go to college. My greatest fear was someone would wonder what I did to deserve my parents not supporting me in college and buying a boat instead. So all of those different ways, whether I consciously or unconsciously silenced myself or was asked to be silent, there was a threat of silence. And I'm a very big believer that one of the most untapped tools that we have at our disposal to be good with money, to realize our full financial potential, is to actually understand our stories, where our bias toward money silence comes from, and
Mm-hmm.
to understand how we talk to ourselves about money. And even just knowing all of that, we can step into conversations in a much more powerful way, whether the other person we're talking to has done their own money work or not. We are just much more powerful if we've got insight and consciousness around our own money history. And when I think about being good with money, to me, it's not just what you do with your money, how you earn it, how you spend it, how you save it, etc. It's also knowing who you are. But I really think the holy grail is taking those two pieces and being able to talk about it, how you talk to yourself about it, and how you step into conversations about it. I actually think that's the missing link in financial literacy.
Mm. So I've gone through your book and read your book, Be Good with Money. It's a wonderful tool, and it's so refreshing to hear financial professionals speak about these types of, I would say, past, familial, societal issues surrounding our money story. One of the things that you've heard me speak about and that I speak a great deal about in my conscious work is that what we feel or how we feel about money, it matters. That carries a vibration. Just like you're speaking about learning how to talk about money, the words that we speak are a reflection of what we think and feel. And those words, they also carry a vibration. So there's energy behind all of that. When we have an experience like the infractions that you spoke of when you're 5 years old, when you're 10 years old, and when you're 17 years old, all of those experiences have been felt. That they imprinted on you, if you will, a very deep, intense feeling. And those feelings did not feel good. And so I think when we talk about money, very rarely, if at all, or ever, are feelings taken into consideration when we create our financial equations. And so I would love for you to share with us. You created a framework in your book, Be Good with Money, about uncovering and, I would say, discovering what is going on with you and your money. You have definitions for it, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
you could go through some of the, maybe one or two of them about your money hood and your money self or your money script, things like that?
Sure. So moneyhood is just my shortcut term. And it's really a riff off of, we all grow up in a neighborhood. I think we grow up in a moneyhood, which has many of the same elements of a neighborhood. So it's kind of the social, emotional, environmental, time era, socioeconomic status. So it's, who were our biggest influencers? Were they family? Were they close family friends, etc.? What was the zeitgeist of the time? What were the media conversations? How was your media delivered to you? What did you actually, pick up on? What did you observe in your mainly in your family situation? Although it can be others, but what did you observe in terms of how your parents mainly behaved around money? How did they talk about money? Outside of the family, was it talked about? So it's really what was your standing in your neighborhood? Were you did you have the nicest house on the street? Were you living in an apartment? And how did you stack up compared to others? Because we do compare and everything. We're human, right? Humans compare. We compare up, down, sideways, and all over the place. So all of that is your moneyhood. And all of that goes into influencing how we think and feel and act and behave around money. And I think you've hit on something about feelings. So from what I understand about human development, especially very young, we feel things before we have the consciousness and the ability to identify what's actually happening through language and words.
Yes.
So that imprints us 1st. And I could not agree with you more that we have we have feelings about money. Some of them get very deeply seated into our body. Some of them stay, below the surface of the conscious, and some we're just very, very aware of. Some of the money self is really what I'm describing when I talk about these things, right? So your moneyhood is kind of at large. What was your, upbringing and all of the facets that we just talked about. And your money self is really how you think and feel and act when it comes to money, right? Because stack up all the people on the planet, and we're all going to have a different point of view. In fact, I'll give you an example. So I'm a very avid photographer, and I was on a kind of a photo excursion with some other photographers, and we all set up our cameras. It was at a waterfall. We were there at the same time, the same place, the same exact lighting conditions, taking pictures of the same subject. And at the end of the shoot, we all oohed and ahed at each other's photos off the back of our cameras. And that was the moment that it really struck me. Not a single one of those photographs looked like any of the others. And that's when I really understood the concept of point of view. So it's everything that's gone on before you press the proverbial shutter on your money is going to influence how your picture looks. And you can have the same exact conditions as everyone else, and it's still going to be different because we're all influenced differently.
Right. It's kind of like the idea that we all are wearing rose-colored glasses. And so the world is distorted based on what we're viewing through. So whatever screen that we're viewing through, which is influenced by our moneyhood, our money self, our experiences, traumas, dramas, even generational stuff that we don't think belongs to us. And I'll even go as far as ancestral things that are on the level of the soul, things that we feel very deeply that we can't put our finger on when we first felt it. Those things, I believe, are carried over from lifetime to lifetime. And that all informs how we view the world. I love that you brought up cameras, because one thing I say about the camera is that it's objective. The camera itself, the instrument that's taking the image, doesn't have any beliefs. It doesn't have, any thoughts as far as we know about anything that it's taking a picture of. It's the intention, it's the energy of the human being who's looking through the lens that ultimately changes it. And this goes, back into quantum physics and the idea of how powerful I would say our thoughts are. But the idea is that everybody lends their energy to everything they do, to the home that they lived in, to the art that they create, through any content, anything they create. There's a thread of that person in it. We don't know how that happens. It seems to be very nebulous and intangible, but we know that we do. I would say ubiquitous example that we all notice is the energy that each person brings to a household. Some people bring a very chaotic energy. Some people bring a calming energy. Some people bring an unsafe. Some people bring a secure. They bring part of themselves into the space. And we notice their absence when they're gone. Or the same idea is when you say, oh, I went into a room and you could cut the tension with a knife, that there was this thick, heavy energy. And that is what those individuals in that room are imparting on that space. It is felt. When I say we give very little to no credence of our feelings, I mean it. Like, we are very powerful as energetic beings and we impact everything. That's why, no two pictures look alike because they're taken by two different people. It's like when there's a crime scene and everybody sees something different because there are things that people don't want to see or can allow themselves to see, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. But before we go into the next question that I want to ask you, this is something that I brought up on several occasions during my show about the projector. And the best analogy that I've heard was from a guest that I interviewed a couple years ago who talks about the movie projector. And just think of the old movie houses where there was a projector at the back with a light aperture and it projected the images onto a screen in front of you. We call it a movie, right? So the idea is that our physical body is the projector. Our physical self is what is projecting our reality out in front of us. And this projection, we call it our life. And so the idea is that light that is projecting from my conscious perception is from our heart. Because the heart is, I would say it's real. It projects what we truly feel, not what we say, not what we think things should be, not what we think society wants us to say or do or be, but it's a true resonance of what we're truly feeling inside. We cannot change that. Our heart, it's like the heart wants what it wants, just like we cannot control who we love or who we don't love. We can't, as much as we want to, no matter how inconvenient our love is. And so the idea is that what is projected out into our reality is a reflection of what is going on inside of our heart. And sometimes we don't like that, what we're seeing projected out into our life, but that is in fact coming from within us. And the only way to change what is projected out onto that screen or what is projected out in what you call your life is to change what is going on inside of you. And to me, that's a vibrational shift that must occur. And so when we talk about money, I think, to your point in your book, we don't even get to the very first part of it, which is bringing awareness that this exists. And so you're saying, hey, I bet we can begin this transformation, or we can begin this process of changing what is being projected out into your physical reality if we start talking about it, because that begins what I would call this process of bringing awareness to it, giving value and credence to it. Because like you, my moneyhood was that of shame and secrecy surrounding money. No one ever talked about it. And so the idea is, even though we are children and perhaps we're observers of it, we embody the energy nonetheless. Mm-hmm. And it plays out these crazy, fantastical scenarios throughout our life that cause us a great deal of pain.
Yes. I like you, carried a lot of shame and secrecy around money. And the ironic thing is, I did well financially. I do well financially. However, and I talk about this in the book, I would tell you that I was not living my best life because I had never talked about some of the things that had happened to me. I didn't understand, um, how my body was keeping the score about some of the things that were happening to me. And,
Right.
for example, walking off the dock of the marina, I never got on the boat that day. I literally walked off the dock of the marina with my brain going, college costs a lot of money. I don't have any money. How am I going to get money? Okay, you have to get a job. That was what was whirling through my head on the entire drive home. And to make a super long story short, I'm old enough that I went to the help wanted section of the newspaper and started looking for a job so that I could get to work and make enough money to put myself through college, which is a whole nother story.
Mm-hmm.
What I realize now, and it was the perfect thing for me to have done as a 17-year-old, was my defense mechanism at the time was to tamp down the shame and secrecy and the feelings of betrayal at that moment and get myself into action on a dream, which was to go to college. So I got very practical
Right.
and moved myself forward in my life by, finding the way to get that done. So my defense mechanisms were really privacy, secrecy, and extreme independence. I did not ask for, nor did I want anyone's help.
Mm-hmm.
Probably understandably so, right? The last time I asked for someone's help, they bought a yacht
Mm-hmm.
instead of
Mm-hmm.
helping, right? Which, by the way, a yacht story might be a little hard for people to relate to. What people need to understand is that I actually was keeping two secrets. So it wasn't just that, how my parents used my college fund. It was a larger secret that despite having a now yacht, private airplanes, you name the car, we had it in the driveway, et cetera, et cetera. My parents were down to their last $5 every single time they made a brand new purchase. And
Mm-hmm.
these were not little purchases, these were, huge purchases. And we actually lived paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And there was food insecurity. There was a lot that happened as a result that is a bit similar to a family that struggles financially to not have enough money to make their ends meet. My parents actually had enough money, but they created the situation where there was a lot of scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say yacht, people are like, oh, ho hum, poor you. Yeah, but the truth is, they really couldn't afford anything that they were buying. So it's really, again, only in hindsight and doing my own work, which I'll talk about. There's really a couple of reasons why I've done this work. It was really in doing my own work that I realized my defense mechanisms at the time were completely appropriate to get myself up and out of that situation and moving in the direction of what I wanted to accomplish. And I did. But I never went back to deal with the emotional piece.
Mm-hmm.
And the saddest part of that to me is that by keeping secret the events that had happened in my life and how they impacted me, it prevented people from really knowing who I was. And that's the part that upsets me.
Mm.
I'm past the point of, woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's more a realization now, and it's just a little like, okay, how sad that I was guarded with people really getting to know the real Michelle. And I also give myself the grace that sometimes we're just not ready to do that until we're ready to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, have I done it in a big way, because now I'm turning into one of those people that, have I ever told you my story about blah, blah?
Right. Once you write the
And my
book,
kids
it's
are
out
like,
there. Right.
yeah, only 100 times. Thanks, Mom.
I want to touch on something if I could before we go forward, just so
Sure.
we don't get too far. You talk about this feast or famine experience that you had in your family, and this idea that people may not be able to relate to the yacht thing. what I think people relate to, Michelle, is the feeling of it. Is the
Mm-hmm.
reality of it. No matter what the choices are. And one of the things that I'm reminded of is that it doesn't matter if you grew up in the moneyhood of poverty, where no one had enough. Everybody was just getting by, housing insecurity, food insecurity, safety insecurity, those types of things. Or on, let's say, the opposite end of the spectrum, where there was more than enough and you did have a home and food and cars and planes and trains and vacations and clothes and so on and private education. No matter what your situation or what the moneyhood was, you can still have shame, secrecy, fear, trauma,
Yes.
I would say poverty of spirit, or be walking around with a great deal of unresolved trauma and fear, no matter what the situation was.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in the moneyhood of largesse, there may have been crimes committed around money, or ways of accruing money that were harmful to people. Sex trafficking, drugs. There may be money and stuff, but the way that it was gotten leaves a trail of tears.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not about rich or poor. It's about the feelings that emanate from whatever is happening. But I'll say this about everybody's moneyhood and everybody's money self and money story is that it all happened intentionally. And I say that because I believe that we all signed up to learn something in this life. And this is the scenario that got you moving, right? So I say the universe, it knows what triggers us. It knows what kind of gets us motivated, and it uses that for us to begin what I would consider our soul growth, or our that part of us, our wisdom, like to grow, our, like we talked about, independence and coping and resilience, to get all that stuff going. It never comes from a place of comfort. It
Mm.
always comes from a place of trials, right?
Yes.
And so I kind of like to think of it this way: those times in life when everything was good, that's the calm before the storm. Because I think the universe also knows that we can't just fight this whole life through. We have to have some periods of respite where things are okay and you feel okay. You can't, I mean, fighting the whole time, we just become exhausted and feel
Mm-hmm.
defeated. But then there's going to come a time when it's like, okay, you've rested up, haven't you, Michelle? Here we go again, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because
I agree.
there's more in life for you to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what happens to many of us, Michelle, is that those pains or those infractions actually keep us down. We don't do the introspective work. And like you said, I did the physical stuff. I got my act together. I got independent. I got resourceful, but I never did the emotional work, right? Many of us,
Mm-hmm.
we won't do it. And so we'll continually be triggered through patterns and cycles that keep bringing us back down to zero, so we can finally deal with what's bringing us back down to zero. And, I guess I'm talking about in our financial world. But this to me is what I think financial deja vu is. But you talk about this in your work and in your book. And I would love for you to expound on what financial deja vu means to you.
Well, where it comes from is recognizing a couple of patterns in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting is, and it was a lot of the realizations I've made, no surprise, actually came from writing this book and
Mm-hmm.
doing having done a lot of work before I started writing the book on myself. And then when you have to write deeply, it just it brings you to a whole new place.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, if someone would have asked me before I started writing the book, what was the biggest financial event that had the most impact, I would have said the marina.
Mm-hmm.
And what I now realize, because I started seeing a pattern I had never seen before, it was actually the piggy bank story. So the pattern I started noticing was I would, in my professional life, off and on, I would hire different experts to help me, assist me with different things that I don't have the expertise for. And half the time, the people that I would start working with, I would realize that they're not really delivering on what they said they were going to deliver on, or even who they said they were in terms of how they were representing their expertise or skills. And I would know consciously, I really need to let this go. I need to stop paying them. I need to move on. And I was having the hardest time doing that. And I would prolong it, and I would keep writing the checks every month. And talk about self-sabotage. It was
excruciating. Yeah.
It was excruciating. And I started asking myself a couple questions. The biggest one was, when have I felt this way before?
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized is, when I expressed my wishes, right, I was 5 years old, and I already knew what I valued. I was not going to use my money that was going to harm someone I loved. So no, Dad, you can't have my money for your cigarettes. And his reaction was, he gave me a look of contempt. He reached into my piggy bank. He took the money. I burst out crying. Now you have to picture a little kid in her pajamas in the bottom bunk of a bunk bed on a Saturday morning. Okay. Poor little 5-year-old me. And he walked out with the money that he took without saying a word to me as I was hysterically crying. My reaction in that moment, I was silent, but in my body and in my mind, I wanted to run after him. No, 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 Daddy, you can have my money. I take back what I said. I was ready to invalidate what I felt around my values about money because I was chasing his love, because he rejected it in that moment. And that was what I was doing as an adult with professionals I was hiring. I was conflating, if I say no to you, Mr. or Miss Human Being that I'm working with, and I cut ties professionally and financially with you, you're not going to love me anymore.
Right, right.
That was a huge breakthrough for me. And I never realized that until I realized it, I could then see many different times that had shown up in my life where I hung on longer financially with something than I knew better than to do, but felt very stuck to actually act on it. It would really get to an excruciating point before I would finally, cut the tie. And once I realized it, my awareness is so much more powerful. I recognize it immediately. I work really hard when I do recognize it to digest it and then decide what I'm going to do with it. And 99% of the time, we're gonna cut bait now before this gets more costly for me. That is financial deja vu. But here's how I would define it. It's being in a present situation, financial situation, that may or may not, usually does not have any factual similarities to a different event in your life, but it feels the same. So dealing with my father with a piggy bank on a Saturday morning versus being in adulthood and negotiating for somebody, doing something in my business, completely different set of circumstances, but it feels the same. That's financial deja vu.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm going to share something about our feelings. I believe our feelings are intentional and they are meant to be felt. I've already talked about them being at their very core energy, an energetic part of our essence. And them being energy, they cannot be forgotten. They cannot be gotten rid of. They must be transformed. And you talked about a breakthrough. That in the realm of, I would say, spirituality or the realm of energy is what is it's called a transformation of that energy. We call it a breakthrough, and it changes our awareness. So our feelings, again, are intentional and meant to be felt. You will continue to have the triggers or the scenarios and situations that transcend time and space. And just like you said, it feels the same. It's the same feeling I had as a 5-year-old, I have as a 50-year-old, just a different, more fancy scenario. What's important is that feeling is the same. So you've been seeing these situations and feeling these feelings over and over again for decades until you can break through it. And then you'll notice that you no longer have the triggers or the situations or the people or the contractors or whatever that trigger that feeling, because you don't have to anymore. You realize that this comes back to me being that 5-year-old in my pajamas, coming out of my lower bunk and believing in that moment I wasn't loved by my father. And then recognizing that that was a story that you told yourself, because that's all that you could do as a 5-year-old. And what I think happens, Michelle, is this opens a place for forgiveness and compassion for that 5-year-old self that created that belief. That's all that you could do. You didn't have the capacity to have further or higher understanding and critical thinking. Impossible. And so if we all can do that, we can recognize that most of this stuff we can identify in our childhood. Those first infractions to our self-worth. All of the traumas that have painted our financial picture. And when we can do that, we can begin to at least see ourselves with greater compassion and forgiveness and understanding. And the best way that I think some people, they have difficulty forgiving themselves. That's the hardest person on earth to forgive is themselves. But I say, just imagine if it was your own child, your own grandchild, your own nephew, niece, whatever child in your life, and they have the same feeling and the same belief. As a grown-up person, what would you do and say to them? And I say, offer that same level of compassion and understanding to yourself. And then we can begin to break these patterns. But again, that's just the beginning. And I love how you outlined that there's a common thread, but there are some major points that you can point in your life where that feeling was most intense. But still, that thread has been coursing through you and perhaps through generations of your family and perhaps into the ancestral planes. That is a long energetic thread. And that maybe you are the person that has stood up to transform it, to finally change it and break that financial deja vu.
I don't often stop and think about the impact, the reverberation generationally going forward, right? Or maybe even going back. What do they say? We affect 3 generations behind us and forward. I think more in terms of my real life right now with my 2 sons. And I wanted for them to know that money is not private. It's not secret. It is something that can be talked about. Yes. And what they'll do with it, I hope will be,
Talked
well,
about.
it'll have an impact. I know that for sure. That's part of their moneyhood. What that will be, if it's a generational break in the cycle, I welcome that for sure. Just to comment on some of the things that you were saying, one of the things that I realized, because we've talked about feeling so much today, is that I was fighting my way out of situations using my intellect. And it was when I married it with Really understanding and healing the emotional pieces is when life, I don't know, colors were brighter, everything tasted better, relationships were deeper, everything.
Right.
It was very much worth it. And generationally, we do inherit, we do come into an inheritance on, just about everything in our lives has been passed down to us to some degree. And we do have scripts around money, right? So people, there are four: money avoidance, money focus, money status, and money vigilant. And the money vigilant subconscious script is money is private. And that's what I started challenging, because people who are money, out of those four scripts, from a purely dollars and cents standpoint, that tends to be the script where people do the best financially and have the least amount of psychological issues with money. And just for you and for the listeners, the other three scripts, the underlying beliefs, for example, with money status is my net worth is my self-worth. Money focus is a belief that more money will fix all of my problems. And money avoidant is the belief that money is bad. And there's lots of shades of gray there in these scripts. None of them really are bad. None of them are really good. They do show, scientifically backed tendencies toward different levels of success, as well as problematic behaviors that can arise, as well as some upside of what can arise on having any one of these four scripts. But I have met many, many people who are financially successful who do not have the inner peace or the inner life with money that they desire.
Right.
And that was part of how I arrived, especially mixed in with my own experience of it's really breaking through that belief that money is silent, that I think is the holy grail. It's the next step, right? If you already know what to do with your money, you're earning it, et cetera, right? You've got the mechanics, you have an understanding of who you are. The next level breakthrough is being able to talk about money, because money is not just the exchange of money, the commodity. We live in exchange around money. We have interactions with money, right? With other people all day long, every single day. And to not know how to converse is a limitation. Right? It's a limit. You will compromise, you will compare, you will not be the recipient of necessary information that would be valuable. You will not be able to correct errors in your thinking if you don't have the ability to speak about the topic.
Or close a sale.
I agree.
Okay. Well, Michelle, you have offered us a wealth of information and perspectives. I would love for you to share with us how individuals that would potentially want to work with you or learn more about you, how can they find you?
Thank you for asking. And it's been great being here with you. There are a couple different ways. My book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. People can find me on LinkedIn. And I have something special regarding the book. If listeners go to my website, which is Michelle-Arpin-Begina.com, so Michelle-Arpin-Begina.com, right on the homepage, they can download the first chapter PDF of my book, Be Good with Money.
Wonderful, wonderful. Michelle, I feel like we could talk for hours, and there may be a place for an encore episode with you to go deeper into the avoidance, focus, the status, and the vigilance around money, and all the resources I'll share with the audience are in your book, which I feel like it's invaluable. It's wonderful to hear someone with your level of financial expertise and experience speak about money in this way. Truly, it warms my heart.
Thank you.
Interested in giving Magic Mind a try? Get $30 off your first subscription with code BeConscious20 at checkout. You can claim it at www.magicmind.com/BeConscious20. The link can be found in the show notes. I want to thank you for taking this inner journey with us today. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious. If you love this episode and if today's message resonated with you, please subscribe, rate, and review the Be Conscious podcast. This helps listeners just like you find intriguing and transformative content. I also want to know what inspired you and what conscious topics you would like to hear more about. And if you want, you can share those thoughts and questions with me at info@susannicholas.org.
Thanks for listening to the Be Conscious podcast with author, TEDx international speaker, and conscious coach, Dr. Susan Nicholas. Be sure to connect with her to stay up to date with her latest news and works. Learn more about her conscious speaking platform at susannicholas.org/speaking. Stay tuned for the next thought-provoking episode. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious.